Everyone, welcome to MarketBeat Mondays. We're so glad you're here for our live stream today. A lot to talk about as the market hits new all-time highs yet again. Here to break it all down for us is MarketBeat analyst Chris Markoch. Chris, we're so glad you're here with us today. Thomas is gone today. We'll tell you why in a little bit. It has to do with
Right.
one of the stocks we're going to cover today. But Chris, I want to start out with just a look at the market as a whole. Some really exciting news as the market reaches another new all-time high to start out the 4th of July week.
Right. So it is starting out the 4th of July week, but today marks the end of the second quarter. So that's kind of a specific date for investors and sometimes psychologically important date when you're closing out a quarter. The market had a lot of momentum going into the day anyway to close out the quarter. So on the one hand, you could say maybe this was just a case of investors deciding, okay, you know what? The market's been fine. It's been growing. So let's just keep the party going for at least another day. We'll see how that happens when we go into July. Seems kind of like a what me worry market right now. There's a lot of bricks in the walls of worry that the investors have been climbing that have been falling off. Inflation is not where the Fed target would like it to be at 2%, but it seems like it's not going much higher, at least right now. So that concern is fading a little bit. A lot of investors would like to see interest rates come down, but right now, interest rates where they are don't seem to be impacting corporate earnings all that much. So that's another area of concern that's being mitigated a little bit. And then we have some other news, like it looks more likely than not that the one big beautiful bill is going to actually make its way through Congress at some point. Whether or not it hits this self-imposed deadline of July 4th doesn't seem to be really that big of an issue anymore. But what seems to be driving market sentiment is that the bill is going to pass. That's the most significant part of that, is the fact that it's going to clarify tax policy for businesses going forward, and that could be very bullish for hiring, and it could start clarifying some things in the labor market for investors.
Yeah. A lot going on and a lot to cover in the market right now.
Absolutely.
I do want to start with a look at that heat map that we like to start out these Market Beat Monday lives with, and just to
Sure.
see which sectors are doing well, which aren't. I've got that pulled up here real quick. There's quite a bit green today, which is always good news for investors. Tesla looks like the outstanding red one for now, but a
Yeah.
lot of green, a lot of gray, a lot to talk about in the tech industry. NVIDIA reaching yet another all-time high. That's some really good news for NVIDIA and for people who own a lot of those AI and tech companies. Let's talk about what's happening in that sector, Chris.
Yeah. So last week, especially towards the middle of the end of last week, the AI trade just took off again. I think there was just a case of investors saw inflation is stable, and investors are just trying to step on the gas again, because what they're seeing is, again, as I was saying, there's just a lot of these areas of concern that they had in the first quarter. Some of those seem to be mitigating, and right now that means there's a bullish outlook for GDP growth in the second half, and investors are making sure that they don't want to be left behind. They want to be making sure that they're in stocks right now, and they're in the stocks that they want to own. And one of the stocks, of course, that they want to own is NVIDIA.
And a lot of people do own NVIDIA. This is one of the most
Correct.
common stocks out there. It's so popular. And again, like you said, lots of reasons why this stock is doing so well right now. An interesting story, though. We had a video come out on Friday where Thomas and I were talking about NVIDIA versus AMD. Also
Right.
mentioned Micron a little bit and how well all of those AI chip stocks are doing, the big boost this whole sector got. But today, AMD didn't see the same kind of boost that NVIDIA saw. Let's take a look at that one. Why do you think that one's seen a different story than NVIDIA today?
Yeah, I think AMD was down. Looks like it was down about a 1.5% today, like 1.45%. I'm not reading that much more into it. I think that might have just been a sense of, again, end of quarter, could have been some funds rebalancing some things. Who knows? I'm not seeing any. There was no really news that came out that suggested anything for investors to be concerned about. So AMD was having a strong performance. I think this was just a regular pullback for the stock.
All right, very good. I'm going to be pulling up some of these charts here in a minute, just working to get that charts back.
And again, when they're right, and with the stock that like AMD, when it goes up like this high, that it's you see a move of 1.4%, and it seems like a lot, but really in the big picture, it's probably not that significant.
Yeah, probably not much. Still a pretty positive day for most of the market.
Absolutely.
I want to welcome everybody who's here. Thank you for joining us for our Market Beat Mondays. If you've been here before, you kind of know the routine of what we're going to do. We are taking your suggestions. We want to hear what stocks you're interested in covering. I won't be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to try to have Chris cover as many as we can. A lot of times we have Chris and Thomas here, so one can look up one of the stocks you want to hear about while the other one talks about another stock. I have a few stocks that you guys have commented on in other videos throughout the past week that we're going to get to here first. And then I'll start going through the comments in the chat right now of companies you want to hear more about. Thanks to those who've already joined in and sent out some of the ones you're interested in. SoundHound up today, Brian. That sounds interesting. We can talk about SoundHound in a little bit too, and some of the other names that you have on here for us. Guys, thanks again for being here with us. Chris, let's get started with our individual stock stories today by talking about why Thomas isn't here today. And that's because he is at Disney with his family. He's kind of supporting the big boost in the stock price that Disney's seen this week. So let's talk about what's going on with Disney.
Yeah, sure. I don't know whether to, whether to be celebrating with Thomas or feeling sorry for him. I mean, this is Disney is not it's not a cheap trip for him, but I'm happy for him. I'm glad to see him spending time with his family down there. So Disney has been on a great run. It's up about 9% in the last month, but more importantly, it's up about 25% in the last 3 months. And of course, investors would know that sort of goes right from stock took a big dip right around Liberation Day when the entire market went down, but it's recovered strongly since then. It's now up about 11% for the year. And the chart looks solid. I mean, there really doesn't. It broke above its former 52-week high at around 117, and really right now there doesn't look like there's a lot of upward resistance there. So it could possibly be heading up to in the 120s, and it's just a very strong stock. But I think what I would prefer to look at more so than the technical side of it is the why. What's happening? Why is Disney becoming so popular with investors again? And I think the story there, Bridget, is that Disney looks like a company that once again is starting to fire on all cylinders. That was the story that really propelled it in 2021. As a lot of investors remember, even though there were a lot of restrictions to travel and other things, Disney was still managing to do very well. People wanted to go to Disney, especially Disney World, which is in Florida. And then we started seeing a little bit of softness there as we got into 2023 and 2024, as interest rates started moving higher. And I'm not going to say that the theme park business really tanked, but you saw that there was some pressure on the consumer. There was only so much, it got to a point where Disney could only pass along those price increases so much before consumers started saying, okay, enough's enough. And Disney, to that point, Disney management itself said in the last quarter, in their last earnings report, that that's one risk that still is out there for the stock is, if the consumer really does weaken at all, that could be a little bit of a headwind in terms of the theme park business. Again, the theme park business isn't going to crash, but if there's any weakness there, that's probably where it's going to show up. Offsetting that is the streaming business, which Disney's done a remarkable job of making that business profitable, which it wasn't before. They're experiencing some really good synergy with Hulu and ESPN and the bundle with Disney Plus. So things are moving in the right direction for streaming. And like I said, it's been profitable. Plus they have some blockbusters on the big screen with the Lilo and Stitch movie that just came out and others. So again, Disney's just a stock that's starting to hit on all cylinders again, and that's good news for investors.
A lot of good news with that company.
Yeah.
That chart really impressive. So if you're a Disney holder, congrats.
Yeah.
There's a lot of comments coming in. I love to see it.
Especially if you had courage to hold Disney.
Yes, yes. If you were one to hold it, you did really, really well right now. I love to
Yep.
see these comments coming in. If you see me looking at the screen, I'm just looking up at some of the things you have to say here. A couple of the names you guys are talking about are ones we have on our list to talk about right away. So we'll dive into one of the first ones. And this is the most common one we've been hearing about for the past 2 weeks. That's BBAI.
Yeah.
These have been such popular stories on our website, on our YouTube channel, and obviously in the chat. A lot of people want to hear about it too. So let's dive into what's going on with the big rise the stock continues to see.
Yeah, boy. I mean, you look at the Big Bear chart, and it's very impressive right now. So I know you had Gabriel on the channel last week on our YouTube channel, and there was obviously a ton of interest in Big Bear in the stock. So what we've got here is a company that is aligned with the growing interest in defense stocks, and this is a very small company still. But what they're doing, in fact, they're not as small as they used to be. They're about a $2 billion company. But when you compare it to a company like Palantir, which is about a $200 billion company, it's still a small company. And what investors are noticing is that Big Bear is gaining a lot of traction with the Department of Defense. They're getting some of those contracts that maybe would have gone to a company like Palantir in the past. And investors are buying into the idea that maybe Big Bear is a little bit more nimble, has a little bit more upside growth than a stock like Palantir, which a lot of people consider to be very overvalued at its current level. I think recently a lot of the movement in the stock is done by technical, technical indicators. The stock's made a parabolic move in early 2025. But what we've seen is even since April, that uptrend has continued. You're seeing higher lows, higher highs. That's a bullish pattern. So right now the question is, where might resistance be? And a lot of people believe that next resistance might be coming at the $8 and $9 level. And as I'm looking at the chart, that's right around where you see kind of the all-time high for Big Bear being. So I think right now a lot of what's driving the stock is technical indicators, but the company reports its earnings at the end of July, and I believe they report it probably just a few days before Palantir reports, and a strong report there could send the stock much, much higher.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see. And I know you are kind of our Palantir expert here. Gabriel gave his own analysis of what was calling Big Bear kind of the next Palantir story, or at least the potential to be the next Palantir story. Brian Morris, thank you for tuning in today.
Yeah.
He's asking to hear your analysis on Palantir today. Just seeing a little bit of a rebound today. What could be behind the growth in that stock? And again, it went to new all-time highs, and it seems to be holding pretty steady.
Sure. Well, that's a great question. I'm glad Brian asked it. I can give a really concise answer here. So on Friday, right towards the close, Palantir dipped sharply, and it had some people freaking out. What's going on? Why is Palantir dropping? And the answer is very simple, and it's innocuous, nothing for investors to be concerned about. As we've talked about on the channel before, Palantir was announced about a month ago or so that Palantir was going to be added to the Russell 1000. So because of the growth that's happened with Palantir over the last year, it's now got a market cap that makes it a large cap stock. And that means it doesn't really fit in with a lot of the smaller players in the Russell 2000. It's got to be up with some of the big boys in the Russell 1000. Well, what happens when something like that happens is a lot of the funds, the passively managed funds, they have to rebalance themselves. And that means that they have to sell some stock of Palantir. And that's really all that happened on Friday was those funds had to rebalance, which means they had to sell off some of the Palantir, which they waited until the very end of the day to do. And now today you saw a lot of that money coming right back into Palantir now that they're in the Russell 1000. Again, this was a nothing occurrence. Freaked out some shareholders, I'm sure, in the short term, but nothing really there. Palantir's just announced that they signed a contract with Accenture. I just wrote an article today that it just signed a contract with the U.S. government to build an AI-powered nuclear operating system. So again, a lot to like about Palantir still. The individuals that don't like its valuation aren't going to like its valuation. There's nothing I'm going to say that's going to change that. But certainly the short-term price action that you saw on Friday, nothing to be concerned about.
Well, thanks for going through Palantir. I knew you could answer that one off the top of your head pretty well. I love to see these questions coming in. Another one that I thought was really interesting, Likma said he wants to know if you think the market is overbought in general, if we're getting too high or too big for our britches. I know there's still plenty of people out there, investors out there, who are concerned that another drop might be coming. They're skeptical of the growth that we're seeing, of this super fast rebound. What are your thoughts on whether the market is overbought right now?
Oh boy.
That's a big one, I know.
No, it isn't. It's just one of those that you kind of have to plant your flag in one place or another. And so my personal opinion, and again, this is not the opinion of MarketBeat or anything like that. I think Thomas would probably disagree with me. My personal opinion is I think investors need to proceed with caution, but definitely proceed. I don't think this is a time to sell all your stocks. I don't think it's a time to get out of the market. But I'm still a person that I'm skeptical of the market, not because of the price action that you're seeing with the NASDAQ or the S&P. Stocks are going to be what stocks are going to be and what investors want them to be at any given moment. What I'm seeing is a contradiction, Bridget, and the contradiction is what concerns me a little bit. On the one hand, you see the S&P hitting new highs. You see the NASDAQ hitting new highs. On the other hand, you see a lot of money sitting in money market funds. You see gold was down a little bit today, but gold is still up near record highs. Bitcoin made a big surge today. And so that's telling me some things here. That's telling me, first of all, that there's still a lot of money on the sidelines. That's what the money market funds tell me. And then when I see Bitcoin and gold rallying, what it tells me is that investors are still looking at that hedge. They're still trying to hedge their risk a little bit. So again, it's hard to fight the market, and I don't think investors should do that. I think they should be careful about what companies they're investing in. This is a market that I've said for a while, you need to be focusing on the best, and putting your money in where the leaders are, and that includes stocks like NVIDIA and Palantir that may look a little bit overvalued, but at the same time, that's where the growth is. But I do see there still being some contradictory signals that make me a little bit cautious.
Cautious optimism is an okay thing right now in this market. Well, let's get to some of the names some of our viewers want to see today. One that a few people have asked about is SoundHound. Speaking of overbought or a lot of really fast valuation, SoundHound has had quite the interesting story over the past year. A lot of really rapid climbs and then really rapid declines as well. Let's talk about what's happening right now in this stock.
Yeah, I haven't paid a lot of attention to SoundHound in recent months. I know Thomas tends to be our resident expert on SoundHound. What I'm seeing here in the last month, especially, let's see, it's up about 12% in the last 5 days. This is starting, Bridget, I'm going to say this. It's starting to feel a little bit to me like this might be a short squeeze in the works. SoundHound's a stock that's got over 34% short interest. That's a lot. So I can't speak specifically to what's been going on in the stock in recent days, but when I see short interest that high and it's up about 5% in the last month, I'm seeing a stock that's down 45% year to date, but then it shoots up 12% in the last week without any new earnings news or something. That tells me that it's kind of there might be a little bit of short covering going on. I like SoundHound. I like the message behind it, but I think this is one you got to be a little bit careful about in the short term.
Yeah, some really good points on SoundHound, Chris. I want to bring up, I know Thomas isn't here today. This is one that he and I have talked about a few different times. So I'll just talk through some of the points that Thomas likes to make about SoundHound. He's always been really bullish on
Yeah.
this company and just the success it's had in making AI useful for
Yes.
businesses on a major scale. And that's, there was the McDonald's contract. There's been all kinds of fast food services that are now using SoundHound. So it's really, really popular. But I think another important point to talk about with SoundHound is what analysts are saying. And the question that one of our viewers had was, is it going to get back up to $24? If you look at what analysts say, that doesn't seem that likely. Their consensus price target is $10.50 on this stock. And even the highest analyst estimates are $18. So it seems a little out of range to get back to that $24 anytime really soon. Chris, maybe you can talk a little bit more towards what those analysts have to say versus what we know about the potential of the tech that SoundHound has.
Well, again, I think that when you start seeing investors getting excited or thinking that the stock might get up to $24 again, I think you have to ask yourself the question, why did it get up to $24 to begin with? And again, the company is different than the stock. And I think the stock went up to $24 because a lot of investors got very excited and they bid the stock up that high. But the fundamentals don't necessarily support that. Again, this is still not a profitable company, although, revenue is growing and it's growing strongly year over year, but this is still not a profitable company. Doesn't, by what I'm looking at on the estimates, it doesn't look like it's going to be profitable anytime soon. So nothing wrong with investors being excited. I think they have to temper that optimism a little bit. I look at the analyst forecast on MarketBeat. The consensus target is right around where the stock's trading right now. I agree with you, Bridget. I'm looking at some of the current analyst estimates, nowhere near $24 a share. Does that mean that the stock isn't worth investing in? Certainly not. But I think investors have to be realistic with their expectations. Again, this is a stock that has heavy short interest. That means good and bad. It means that there's going to be significant pressure on the stock downwards. It also means that, yes, if you're a trader, if you catch the stock at the right time, you could possibly see the stock move forward because of a short squeeze, and that can move the stock higher. So again, fundamentally, I agree with a lot of what Thomas says about the stock, and I think it's a great company, and I think there's a bright future. I think in the short term, you got to temper your expectations a little bit with it.
Yeah, great look at SoundHound. I know there's a lot of other companies we want to get to yet today. I got it kind of in order in my head. I'll let you guys know what we're going to be talking about first. So we're going to talk about SoFi next because quite a few people want to hear about that one. So we're going to pull up SoFi first.
Okay.
Then we have another small cap company that's similar that does some financial transactions. We're going to share some of that with you guys in just a minute. And then after that, we're going to get to VRT. We've had a few different people asking us to talk about that one. I think that's popped up in our Monday lives before. It's not something we've done a video on before though. So we'll give Chris some time to look at that one too in a minute. But first, Chris, let's get to SoFi a little bit. I've got the chart here pulled up right away.
Interesting chart, yeah.
It is an interesting chart today. It saw quite a bit of a climb, up 13.5% in 5 days, which is some good stats for SoFi. Any idea what's behind some of the rise in the stock?
I am trying to find that out for you because so let's see here. Because this is exciting news if you're a SoFi shareholder, because there's a lot of SoFi shareholders that have been waiting on this stock for a long time. and have thought that this stock could go significantly higher. And it looks like it's finally starting to reward investors a little bit here. It looks like one of the reasons why SoFi is moving higher in the past few days is because they've announced that they're going to be allowing crypto trading on the platform, which, okay, that obviously it seems like there's a lot of investors that like that, which makes a little bit of sense because the target audience for SoFi, at least when they first went public, would align pretty nicely with the crypto industry. That seems to be the immediate catalyst for the stock right now, and why it's gone up, like you said, 13.5% in the last 5 days, and it is now trading at a, let's see, it's not trading at an all-time high, but it's trading at a 1-year high.
Yeah, it's been quite a significant boost. And I think you're right. I think that announcement is good news for this stock. Like you said, there's a lot of SoFi investors. This is one we've talked about on the channel a few times, where people have just are excited about the concept of making banking easier. It's an attractive concept for a lot of young users too. So I think the idea is solid. Whether it means a lot of extra revenue for the company yet, we haven't seen that quite yet. I want to bring up the consensus price targets on this one because I think that is interesting too. It's lower, the average anyway, is lower than where it's trading today. And even on the high end, there's a little bit of upside left if the high end of the estimates are right. But not much room to go.
That's telling me the stock might be ripe for a pullback. Again, we go back, Bridget, and I'm probably going to sound like a broken record today to some investors, but again, the stock is different than the company. I've actually been very intrigued with SoFi over the years, and that's because it kind of falls in that category of what I call the but stocks. It's been a company that sort of has been put down by some investors because, it doesn't do this, and then it does that. And then they say, okay, but it doesn't do this. Okay, but it doesn't do that. And what I've really noticed is that the company tends to say it's going to do something. It does it well. And it doesn't seem to ever quite get the love, which then surprises me because then it starts announcing it's going to do crypto trading and the stock goes through the roof. So again, I think there's probably some reason to believe that it might pull back a little bit from its current level. But I do like the long-term story of this company. And I think, again, it's a company that has had a track record of delivering on what it promises. It's just that I think investor expectations at times might get a little too high for the stock.
Yeah. Well, interesting look at SoFi. There's another company that's not on the chat today, but this came up in comments in some of our videos earlier this week. So I just wanted to pull it up really briefly for investors to see here in our live stream. We are talking about DLO or DLocal. Right. This is a payment transactions company. Chris, give us a little synopsis of what this company is and what you think of the chart right now.
Okay, so so we're very transparent to our viewers. I didn't know really anything about the stock before Bridget brought it to my attention, and so I've been looking at it here before we went on the air, and I really, there's a lot to like about the company. So for those that are not familiar with it, the company is a payment processor, but it handles a very specific niche that really kind of is intriguing to me. So what it does is it specializes in connecting global businesses with consumers in emerging markets. And the reason why that's significant is because if you're a business and you're doing business in the United States, we've got a very defined and regulated banking sector. Businesses know the rules of the road. They know how to work through the sector without a lot of pain. That's not necessarily true in emerging markets like Latin America and Africa. And that's where DLocal comes in. They have an API that they use that acts as a central point for these businesses to use. And that's how they can use DLocal as a way of doing business in emerging markets without necessarily having to go through the banking system in any of those countries. It's a very intriguing very intriguing opportunity, especially at this time when a lot of investors are finding international stocks to have a little bit more of a compelling story than some US stocks. So I'm interested there. I was also reading earlier that the take rate for DLocal has been increasing, which shows that which shows that there hasn't been resistance to the company, again, increasing their revenue while businesses are still saying that they're the platform that they have to use. So I found that really interesting. And then we look at the price action on the chart. Now, like a lot of stocks, this stock got beaten down early in 2025, but it's made a nice recovery since then. It's up about 36% in the last 3 months, which has pushed it positive year to date. It's up also about 40% for the year. So again, a lot to like about this stock. And for investors that care about those types of things, it just announced a dividend for the first time back in May of this past year. It just paid it out in June of just last month, or just this month, I should say, 52 cents a share. So not a bad story here. A stock that I was really kind of I learned a lot about today, and I was happy I did.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing that one. It looks like we got another person. Colt had just asked us to talk about it. So there's more people interested in this one too. Let's move on to another one a lot of people in the chat want to hear about today, and that is VRT. I don't know if you've had enough time to look it up. I'm just going to pull up the chart here and a little bit more about the company as you have a chance to look it up. Our company overview says it is a global provider of critical digital infrastructure and continuity solutions. It's been around since 2016, it looks like. Some rebranding, different things. It's focused on delivering highly engineered systems, hardware, software, and services to support core data centers, communication networks, and commercial and industrial environments. So kind of a data center play here, it looks like.
I think you said it all right there.
Yeah.
Again, this is not a stock that I'm very familiar with. I've looked at it before. You hit on the words: infrastructure, high tech, data center. It's got everything going for it right now. I think especially when I look at it and I see it's up 72% in the last 3 months, 19% in the last month. That's not a coincidence. One of the big things, you saw it dipping like a lot of stocks did right as the tariffs were being announced. In early April, it was at its low point for the last year, and it's rocketed high after that. And the biggest reason for that is because you've heard companies like Meta and Microsoft and others announce the fact that they're committed to their data center spending. The AI trade has not gone away, and that's going to mean, again, we need more data centers. We need more building of data centers, and Vertiv certainly hits the sweet spot right there with that.
Yeah, it's another one, kind of like we've talked about Applied Digital on these lives before. That's another company that people have been interested in. Very different price point, but it's interesting to look at this chart for Vertiv and see they've doubled in just a few months, which is a very interesting stock story for sure, and plays along with the growth in AI that we're seeing right now, kind of like that NVIDIA all-time high we talked about earlier on in the live stream. There's just a lot of momentum for AI once again, even though just a few months ago, people were questioning that. That's what I think is kind of interesting to see as somebody who's now in the stock market every day, is how quickly the sentiment can turn from really negative earlier just a few months ago to now really, really positive again.
Right. And something I think when you look at it's really important when we look at stocks like this that we don't necessarily try to think of them as a collective group, but we kind of take each one for what it's worth. And a lot of people could look at a stock like Vertiv and they can see that its current PE ratio is around 74 times. Its forward PE ratio is 35 times. And they could start thinking, the debt to equity ratio is around 1.09. So that means it does have a little bit of debt, but I think what you have to look at here is that earnings are expected to grow by 24% this year. That's that's pretty exciting. So if you're saying you're a company that's in this sweet spot with data centers, your forward PE is 35 times and you're expected to grow earnings at 24 times. I kind of like that. That's kind of something you can look at, and it looks like it was Evercore back just about a month ago. They reiterated their outperform rating on the stock, and they gave it a 150 price target. But what was more significant from that is that they raised that price target from $100 to $150. So that's a pretty significant jump to bump a stock up that high.
Yeah, that is a really significant jump. I just pulled it up on the screen. Just wanted to give people a chance to see that. I love hearing about these different stocks from people. They share what they want to hear about. That's what these Monday Lives are about. We always come up with some interesting stories out of the suggestions that you guys have. So thanks again for joining the chat here. Chris, you and I both just did a video that posted yesterday. It's been really popular, and that was 3 defense plays that are all under $10, and one of those was
Right.
Red Cat. This video has been really, really popular, so if you haven't watched it yet, you should definitely go take a look at that full video where Chris and I really dive into these stocks a little bit more. We had somebody ask about Red Cat again just right now in the comments, so let's go through Red Cat again. We can pull up that chart really quick. I'm not sure if it had any moves
Okay.
today.
Yeah.
But I've got Red Cat. It's got up 2.82% in 5 days. So not bad. This company, it's really interesting. Again, you can see that our full dive into Red Cat a little bit. But Chris, off the top, if you can remember back, what are some of the things that you liked about Red Cat?
So a couple things I liked about Red Cat is that this is a company that is closely tied with the drone industry. In fact, what they're considered as kind of the picks and shovel for the drones. Instead of just being like we talked about last week, we talked about AMRX, and that's a company that's specifically with lithium ion batteries for drones. But this kind of provides a lot of a broader range of products and services and solutions for the drone industry. One thing I talked about last week, and we talked about it again on the video that we did, Bridget, was one of the reasons why the stock's been up a lot, it's 23% in the last month, is because the stock just completed an equity offering. Now, again, when you deal with a company like Red Cat, and I'm looking here, and it's got a market cap of only around 669 million, which puts it firmly in the small cap range. Anytime you're dealing with a company like this and a company that is like Red Cat that is not yet profitable, again, that's important to note. Sometimes these companies have to go back to the well and use equity offerings as a way to raise money. But the good news for investors is Red Cat's already through that process. So right now, investors, whatever dilution has happened has probably happened, and they can start looking at the growth again. So that's what you're seeing here. The key for Red Cat and some other companies in this space is how fast can they get to profitability? What is the path to profitability? And that's what investors are going to want to pay attention to.
Yeah, that path to profitability, who's going to get the contracts is the big question in the drone
Correct.
space. We had a special video on last week or almost a week and a half ago now where I had the CEO of Dragonfly Drones on, and he shared a lot about the drone industry in general and how much growth there is, how much demand there is for the products. And he said it takes time to get to that contract point. A lot of these drone companies have been working with, Department of Defense for years, and those contracts are, he said, months away from being announced.
Right.
So it's getting much, much closer to when we might see that profitability, or at least the contracts being announced that could make some major moves in these stocks. And somebody in the comments asked about Dragonfly again. Again, we have a really great video. If you haven't watched that full video yet, check for that on our channel. It's just been in the last 2 weeks, and it's a really interesting discussion from somebody who knows the ins and outs of the drone industry really, really well. I wanted to pull up the chart really quick. If you wanted to see Dragonfly Drones again, that stock is still in just the $3 range, so it's a really low cost stock. It's seen some volatility, and I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of these smaller defense companies right now. There's a lot of interest in these right now. Do you need to be ready for maybe more volatility with some of these smaller companies right now, especially with this renewed interest in the sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is it's interesting that you said that, Bridget, because I think this takes us back to where we kind of started the whole video from. And right now, Especially you've seen it in the last week or two. Investors have definitely gone to take a more risk-on approach with the market, and that works in the favor of companies like Dragonfly, because these are the companies that tend to soar when investors get a lot more bullish about the market. And as long as that risk-on sentiment is there, the stock could go a lot higher. But again, if we start seeing some volatility in the market in the second half, that could work to the stock sentiment. But right now, certainly investors are risk on, and that favors stocks like Dragonfly.
Yeah, in an up market like we're seeing right now, I think the investors, like you said, are easier and more willing to do a little bit of risk because their other investments are doing really well right now. And we like to
Right.
see it. This is the kind of market that is
Oh, absolutely.
more fun to invest in, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
I want to get to a few of the other names that you guys are putting in the chat today. Thanks again for all the comments coming in. We've got just a few minutes left in the live stream today, so I'm going to fit in as many names as we can here. One is a well-known name that's had a crazy stock story this year, Chris. That's UnitedHealth. I've got that chart to pull up here too. And that one has been an interesting year, like we said. So many huge downs for this stock. And now it's been really quite sideways. I know it's been within the last month that you gave some of your own comments on UnitedHealth and why it saw such a big drop.
Right.
But there hasn't been insane moves, it looks like, in the last month or so.
No. Yeah, it's the stock's looking like it's consolidating a lot. Obviously, it hit that really sharp low at the middle of May, but it's bounced off of that, and now it looks like it's it's kind of trading in a range. That's showing consolidation. What I'm noticing is that volume is pretty good, but it doesn't look like the volume has a lot of conviction one way or the other. Let me take a look here. So the moving average, the MACD, shows a bullish trend from where that low was in May. But I'm also seeing, the overall trend is bullish, but there have been some selling days in there as well. This is the interesting thing to me about this story is that the company reports earnings in the middle of July. They'll be one of the first to kick off the new round of earnings. I think a lot is going to depend on what they say in that earnings report. I think investors are going to need a little bit more clarity in terms of, some investors obviously have decided to jump in on the stock. They just felt like it was too cheap to ignore. But I think a lot of longer term investors are going to want to really hear what the company has to say at their, during this earnings report.
All right, the last company I'm going to end on today before we wrap up with some of the things you're watching this week. We had a few people asking about Tesla. It was down today a little bit. What are your thoughts on Tesla this summer? Any more potential movements coming for the stock? People wondering if this little downtrend that we're seeing right now could be a good buying opportunity, or if there's still a lot of volatility ahead for this stock.
Oh boy. I am one of those investors that have probably never been able to get Tesla right. It's why I don't trade it. I'll be transparent with the viewers and say I've never had a position in it because I just don't think I ever get the stock right. Having said that, I really think that a lot of this is just about noise. I think what you're seeing here in the last 5 days is, again, this stock moves, and it seems like this stock moves a lot with what Elon Musk says or what Elon Musk posts about on social media. And he's obviously not very happy with the bill that's moving its way through Congress because it will take away the EV subsidies. So I think a lot of investors are seeing that. And if you're trying to trade the stock, that's probably a signal that you want to sell. Long term, again, the story for Tesla is going to be, I believe, long-term, it's less about electric vehicles and it's more about robotics and it's more about energy storage and those types of things. But for now, it's a stock that is heavily based on electric vehicle sales. Company reports towards the end of July. I don't think the earnings report is probably going to be that good. So I think there's probably more reason to think the stock may have some downward pressure, or at the very least it may chop around here. But again, I've thrown out the caveat before I start talking about it. I've never been able to get Tesla right. So.
It's a hard one to predict, especially right now. I so appreciate the questions from investors wanting to hear more about it. I think you could study Tesla for weeks on end and still not be able to predict what's going to happen with this stock. It's an interesting one, probably fun for traders who like the movement. Well, that's a good look at stocks today. Thank you for everyone who joined us to share some of the stocks that you're interested in. I like to finish these up by just having Chris and Thomas, when Thomas is here, talk about what you're looking ahead to this week. Is there any announcements on the horizon, things that could be coming up this week that you are really paying attention to in the market?
So it's a short trading week because obviously the markets are closed on Friday for the 4th of July. Couple things that I'm going to be looking for. I would be looking for, if I was an investor, progress on the big beautiful bill. Again, no matter where you stand on the politics of the bill, it's important for businesses from a tax perspective that the bill get done. So obviously I want to see that. There's talk that there might be a trade announcement or two this week. I really don't necessarily care about that. It'd be big news for the market if it gets announced, but who cares? The bigger news is that the jobs report actually comes out this Thursday. That's a day earlier than it would normally come out. Normally it would come out on Friday, but since the market's closed on Friday, it's going to come out on Thursday. That could be a market moving event. So that's what I would be looking for. Other than that, it'll just be interesting to see how the rally that was in place in June carries into July, and how it does it on a short trading week. It wouldn't surprise me, Bridget. Here's my bold prediction. It wouldn't surprise me a little bit if there's some profit taking going into the long weekend. That doesn't mean I'm seeing a huge sell-off. It just means that we may be seeing a peak coming like right now, today and tomorrow for the week, and then we might see it coming down a little bit towards the end of the week.
Yeah, good prediction. And I think you could be right too. When we're getting to this high, another new all-time high in two of the indexes today, it makes sense that we might see some of that profit taking today and go off to have a really good 4th of July holiday, maybe buy a few extra fireworks this week with some of your profit taking. We'll see. All right, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be back again next week, Monday, right after the holiday weekend, to kind of get you started on the second half of the year and see where the market might head next week. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. Stay tuned for some interesting topics we'll have on our videos that are coming out every day this week. We'll be off on the 4th of July, but we'll have another video for you on Sunday before we start the week next week too. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. As always, happy investing.